It was 3:30 in the morning when the banging started. Not just a knock, no. This was loud, aggressive, like someone was trying to break the door down. I jumped out of bed, heart racing, confused and half asleep. I grabbed my phone and cautiously made my way to the front door of my beach house, thinking maybe it was an emergency, maybe someone needed help. But when I opened the door, I wasn't met with a neighbor in distress or a police officer. I was met with 3 people from my HOA, no uniforms, no explanations, just cold stares and a clipboard. The man in front, a guy I'd seen maybe twice at HOA meetings, said something I thought I must have misheard. "You need to vacate this property immediately. It's being reassigned." I blinked. "Reassigned?" I asked. "What do you mean?" His answer. "The HOA board has decided this property should serve community use. We'll need to hand it over. Effective now." Honestly thought it was some kind of prank. I laughed at first, assuming maybe this was a joke or someone trying to mess with me, but their expressions didn't change. They were dead serious. The woman behind him even tried to hand me a form, already filled out with my name and address. According to them, the HOA had voted to turn my beach house into a shared clubhouse and I was expected to just hand it over for free. The thing is, I've lived here for years. I've paid every HOA fee, followed every petty rule. But nothing prepared me for this level of audacity. I told them to get off my property, slammed the door, and stood there in silence, completely stunned. But that was only the beginning. What came next was even crazier. And trust me, you're going to want to hear what happened after. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept hearing the knock, their voices, that ridiculous claim. Reassigned. What did that even mean? The next morning, I went straight to my files and pulled out the deed to my beach house. My name, plain and clear, no shared ownership, no leases, nothing weird. I paid this place off 5 years ago. It's mine, every inch of it. Still, I couldn't shake that uneasy feeling. Why would the HOA come to my door like that, in the middle of the night, acting like they had legal authority? I called the HOA office later that morning, and of course, no one answered. Not even a voicemail greeting, just a dead line. So I drove down to their building, which is just a small room attached to the community clubhouse. The same man who was banging on my door mark, I found out his name was behind the front desk. As soon as he saw me, his smile disappeared. I asked straight up, what was that about last night? And with no hesitation, he said, "We're enforcing community policy. The board voted. It's happening." I demanded to see where this so-called vote was recorded. He handed me a printed page that looked like someone typed it in a rush, no signatures. No member names, just bullet points and vague claims like house to be used for greater good. I started to realize something wasn't right. This wasn't how an HOA was supposed to work. I looked around and noticed their office was completely empty. No other staff, no proper records, nothing. Just a few folders tossed around. It felt like they were hiding something, or worst, trying to pull something off behind everyone's back. And if that was the case, I knew I couldn't let it slide. But what I uncovered next made me question everything I thought I knew about this neighborhood. I left the HOA office more confused than ever. It didn't feel like an official decision, it felt like a setup. So I started asking around. I knocked on my neighbors' doors, talked to folks I trusted. Most of them had no idea what I was talking about. Some looked surprised, others concerned. But a few seemed weirdly quiet, like they knew something and didn't want to talk. One older neighbor, Mrs. Ellison, pulled me aside and whispered, "They've done this before, just not this bold. You're not the first they've targeted." Hit hard. I asked her what she meant, but she just shook her head and said, "Be careful." That's when I realized this wasn't just about me or my beach house. Something bigger was going on. I went home and started digging old HOA newsletters, meeting notes, anything public. Most of the records looked normal on the surface, but then I started noticing missing months, skipped votes, and odd decisions that seemed to only benefit a small group of board members. One file even showed a past homeowner giving up their Lakeview home voluntarily. But no one had seen that person since. Meanwhile, I kept getting little notes taped to my front door and signed, saying things like, "You're holding up progress," and "Don't make this harder." It was starting to feel less like a neighborhood and more like I was being cornered. I set up cameras around the property, just in case. At the same time, my phone started blowing up with texts from unknown numbers asking me to cooperate with the board. That's when I started piecing it together. This wasn't just an overreaching HOA. It was a small group using their authority to quietly push homeowners out of prime properties, especially ones like mine near the beach. But I still didn't know why, or how far they were willing to go. A few days later, things took a darker turn. I came home from the grocery store and found my back gate wide open. It's always locked. My security camera had been unplugged, literally yanked out of the wall. Inside, nothing was stolen, but drawers had been opened, papers shuffled. Whoever it was wasn't after valuables, they were searching for something. That's when I knew I was officially being targeted. This wasn't about rules or community guidelines anymore. Someone wanted me gone, and they were getting bolder. I filed a police report, but the officer looked uncomfortable the moment I mentioned the HOA. He said there'd been past complaints involving them, but nothing ever stuck. He told me off the record to keep my guard up and document everything. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat on my porch with the lights on, watching the street. I kept thinking about what Mrs. Ellison said about others before me. I started to wonder how many more had been quietly pushed out and why no one ever talked about it. Then I got an anonymous envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside were photocopies of what looked like internal HOA emails, messages between board members discussing which homes were ideal for conversion, and even a short list of non-compliant owners. My name was at the top, circled in red. One line in particular made my stomach drop. "If he won't sign, we'll pressure him until he does." I realized this wasn't just a bunch of rogue board members acting out. It was an organized effort. They were picking off homeowners one by one. Aiming for the high-value properties near the beach. Mine included Dan using shady HOA votes to justify it all. The clubhouse, the community use excuse it, was a front. They wanted my home, and they didn't care how they got it. I knew I couldn't back down now, but I also knew the next move had to be careful, because whatever I did next, they'd be watching. The next morning, I took the envelope straight to a lawyer who specialized in property and HOA disputes. He scanned through the papers slowly, his eyes narrowing the more he read. After a few minutes, he looked up and said something that made my skin crawl. "These aren't just unethical, they might be criminal. But here's the real issue. This isn't the first time I've seen these names." He pulled out a separate file from his drawer and showed me documents from a different case. Same HOA board members, different neighborhood. Same exact tactics. Fake votes. Pressure, forced handovers. And in that case, the homeowner just vanished. The case was never resolved. The home got donated to the HOA. I left the office with a pit in my stomach. This wasn't about one beach house. This was a pattern, a quiet takeover scheme. And now I had proof. But the moment I got back to my property, I noticed something new. A community use pending approval sign staked right in my front yard. It hadn't been there when I left. I yanked it out and walked straight to my neighbor Rick's house. Rick used to serve on the HOA board before he suddenly stepped down last year. I asked him why he quit. At first, he hesitated. Then he said, because they threatened my wife's business. Said if I didn't step down and stay quiet, they'd revoke her permits. That was the final push I needed. This wasn't just bullying. It was manipulation, coercion, and control. I decided to gather everything: meals, photos, the sign, the envelope, and prep to take it public. But that night, just as I was backing up files on my laptop, the power cut out. Not the whole neighborhood, just my house. Dead silence. Then a knock at the door. Not loud this time, soft, slow, deliberate. When I looked through the peephole, no one was there. But a single sheet of paper had been slipped under the door, and what was written on it changed everything. I picked up the sheet of paper from the floor with shaking hands. There was only one line printed in bold black letters. "We warned you." My heart pounded. I looked around, checked the locks, then grabbed my phone to call the lawyer. Number. Signal. My internet was down too. It wasn't a power outage, was deliberate. Someone had cut me off, but I wasn't about to let them scare me into silence. Not after everything they'd done. First thing the next morning, I drove to the county records office and requested every document tied to the HOA's authority, property claims, and board elections. What I found shocked even the clerk. The current board wasn't even legally elected. Their terms had expired over a year ago, and no new vote had been filed. They were operating without any legal standing. That was my proof. I immediately called a reporter I'd been in touch with from a local news outlet. We met that evening, and I handed over everything: emails, letters, records, that threatening note. By the next morning, the story exploded. Homeowner exposes HOA beachfront power grab was the headline. Neighbors came forward. People who had stayed silent out of fear started sharing what had been done to them: intimidation, backroom deals, forced home sales. It was all finally out in the open. The authorities launched an investigation. Several board members were removed and are now facing charges. The whole HOA was placed under temporary state supervision. And as for my beach house, I still live there. No more threats. No more late-night knocks. Just peace. But here's the twist no one saw coming. About a week after everything settled, I got a letter in the mail postmarked before the story even broke. No return address, just a handwritten note. Good job. Phase 1 complete. Now they'll come for the others. I don't know who sent it. I don't know what it means. But one thing's clear. My battle may be over, but the war in this neighborhood might just be getting started. After that last letter, I stayed alert, half expecting another twist. But weeks went by quietly. The neighborhood was different now. People who used to keep to themselves were suddenly talking, checking in on each other, sharing what they'd gone through. The fear that used to hang in the air had started to lift. The beach house that almost got taken from me. It's now a symbol proof that standing your ground matters. Even the HOA, now under new leadership, is being rebuilt from the ground up with actual transparency, regular elections, open forums. No more shady power plays behind closed doors. Mrs. Ellison invited me over for tea last weekend. She smiled and said, "Told you you weren't the first, but maybe you'll be the last." Rick's wife got her permits reinstated, and he's helping advise the new board, making sure the same thing never happens again. And the lawyer, he's now representing a group of homeowners from the other neighborhood where all of this started. As for the letter, the one that said Phase 1 complete, I still don't know who sent it. I've got it locked away, just in case. Maybe it was from someone who tried to stop them before. Or maybe someone on the inside helping expose it. All from the shadows. Either way, it reminded me that power, when unchecked, can twist into something ugly. And sometimes the people enforcing the rules need to be held to the same standards as those following them. So, if you ever feel like your HOA is stepping out of line, don't stay silent. Ask questions, read the fine print, and most of all trust your gut. Because if I hadn't opened that door at 3:30 a.m., I might never have known how close I came to losing everything I worked for.